So, do you ever wonder why some of your teams succeed? They're super successful, they rock it, and sometimes they fail. Presumably you're the same component of it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Well, my guest today, Vanessa Druskat, I have to make sure I got that one right, the author of The Emotionally Intelligent Team, Building Collaborative Groups That Outperform the Rest, soon to be coming out, actually be out by now, Harvard Business Review Press, shares her experience about why that is true, what are the components of it, what need to be successful on today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Vanessa, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me here,
It's
Anthony.
it's my pleasure. So, some teams work out like gangbusters, others kind of fall flat. How come? Why? Is it all our listeners' faults, or is there something that is the magic that keeps it all together that we're just not aware of?
Well, let me say that that's the question I started with, and in fact, you brought up a topic that got me really interested in teams back in my youth. I discovered that there were some teams in which I really flourished, and I was, really helpful, and there was kind of a magic that occurred. And in some teams, I was so disappointed myself. I couldn't understand what was wrong with me. And then I started to realize that it wasn't necessarily me, it was something else. And anyway, I went back to school, started studying teams, and that was really actually, I was quite disappointed with what I learned, from academia. I was working on a doctorate and planning on really digging deeply into what makes for a great team, and most things pointed to individuals. It's like, hey, if you're good enough, if you've got the grit, get people with grit and eventually emotional intelligence on your team and you're going to be fine. But that wasn't my experience. So anyway, I went out of academia, started looking around elsewhere and started having my own hypotheses, which I then later tested. And I'll tell you more about that, but let me see if you have a follow-up question first.
Well, I mean, one of the things I would think of is, like psychological safety is what people talk a lot about, the ability to work together to recognize early on and presumably frequently that we aren't doing a good job. Conversely, teams that kind of point the finger, let each other fail, say, blame it on others, it's one of those indications. Did you find that to be true, or was the answer elsewhere?
I added to that knowledge. So let me tell you, Amy Edmondson, the woman who came up with that concept, or at least blew it up with her research in fabulous ways, was a friend of mine in graduate school.
Hmm.
So I've been throwing her psych safety scale into my research since when were we in graduate school? 1995, 1994. So, yes, the problem with psych safety as a concept is nobody knows how to build it. And my quest, what I was always looking at is how do you build that great stuff? So how do you build trust? How do you build the magic that creates, psych safety is a fabulous concept. It's almost a household name now amongst leaders. And I love that because it's finally communicating that there is this psychological need that comes about for team members. But the big question that I was looking at is how do you build that kind of stuff? And that's what I set out to do. I started want me to keep going, or do you wanna ask me another question?
I will ask you another question, and maybe you'll land the plane a little bit. As we talk about psychological safety, household name, what about the household name, or if not soon to be, of emotional intelligence? We talk about emotional intelligence. How do
Yes.
those things play off each other or support or yeah.
Yes, precisely. So, here's the dilemma. We talk about both of those as being individual constructs, okay? So, emotional intelligence is something that we can cultivate as individuals. Psychological safety is something that we talk about as something a leader needs to develop with, whoever it is across from them or that a person needs to create for themselves. But that's not what happens in teams. Little known fact about teams, and I'm sure you understand this, Anthony, is that building a team is about creating relationships among the group. So, really, collaboration is not about my relationship as the leader, my relationship with these individuals, or my personal skills. It's the way they interact and whether the way they interact builds trust, psychological safety, and what I now refer to as an emotionally intelligent environment, which is one, where people are aware of one another's needs, they're aware of the team's needs, and they're aware of stakeholders outside of the team, and they manage their behavior to make the most of those things.
So, if we think of the kind of two previous terms as one to one, and then if you think of a leader as one to many, but what I'm hearing here, the key component is it's many to many, both internally and externally to support that effective structure.
Yes, and let me give you an example about that. One of my favorite studies is a study that looked at interactions among the team and how when even one member on the team treats you as if you're invisible or insignificant, your brain, this is how we're wired, decides that the whole team thinks you're insignificant. So the fear pops out. And so the way we treat one another in the team is hugely important. And this is especially true in empowered teams, which is now what we're seeing. I was interested to see that Microsoft just announced that they're moving toward more empowered teams, less management in their ranks, and et cetera, et cetera. And so once again, we're really moving to models, and rightfully so, where team members need to bring the best out of one another.
One of the things that I've experienced in practice and that when I advise leader, I know you do tons of, I haven't shared your bio, but, I encourage you to look it up if I don't read it sometime later, is, I talk to a senior leader and I say, great, you and your other senior leader, y'all are fine. You add this person to the mix, still good. You add this person to the mix, still good. You add this person to the mix, and then you can start seeing it like go downhill. So if that's the case, is it because of that individual, or is it that individual's kind of place within the group, or is it something else entirely?
It's both because of the individual and because of their place in the group.
Okay.
There's not much you can do to change the individual unless you wanna keep changing out members, right? You get a lot more bang for your buck if you change the group and you change the interactions in the group. If you recognize that when people enter groups, they have certain innate, involuntary needs that emerge.
Mm.
And one of those, the most obvious one of all, is the need to be respected and valued, and there's others as well. They need some control. I refer to this as belonging, and I gotta tell you, this is a concept that's been studied for decades by psychologists. It's lately become important, but people don't even really know what it means. So I like to refer to Susan Fisk's deep, deep knowledge of that. She's a social psychologist at Princeton who's been thinking about this stuff for decades, and she says belonging is the need that rules them all. And we feel it when we enter. So when you enter a group, the larger the group becomes, the less likely you're gonna get the airtime to feel, validated. And so you have to create dynamics, routines, things that, habits, which we can explain more about those if you want, that bring out that include everyone. Okay? Let me stop there.
Well, it's interesting. Again, we could talk about this for a long time. And one of my wonder questions is if any CEOs or leaders that think this is just a bunch of hooey and they should just focus on the task at hand or the work. And then I would say, well, reflect back to say the belonging component is you're not trying to have anybody belong to anyone. And then the kind of metaphor story that I think of is when there's folks who've been inside the organization a long time. They have their norms and ways of doing things. You have potentially new leadership that comes in, and then they aren't kind of distinct from pulling people into the strategy is those old folks don't belong to the new folks. And so it is a much about do they like them? Because if you like somebody, you're probably going to do a better effort at making sure that they belong versus if you necessarily don't like somebody for whatever hundreds, thousands of reasons, then you're consciously or subconsciously going to kind of push them out to the outside. And then that supports or doesn't the effectiveness of a powerful team, and then presumably an emotional intelligent leader and emotionally intelligent teams have the wherewithal and or structure to support making sure that nobody feels belonged. Do I more or less have that?
You do, but you need more information, so let me
Cool.
say
Let's keep going.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Liking is about knowing, right? So what I've
What
found,
if
and
you know
okay,
what you don't like?
often you don't like and, we can get I've got 3 degrees in psychology here, so we can talk about why we don't like people, they stir us the wrong way. What I have learned well, first of all, I saw this in great teams, but what I've learned when I went out, my colleagues and I developed this model, this emotional intelligent model, model of an emotionally intelligent culture, and then we went out and used it in organizations, and one of the first steps in that model is getting to know one another. Okay. You can't belong if you don't feel known. I mean, if you don't really feel known. Okay. So, we don't know what, here's an example. You don't find a sports team or a team of musicians that work together that don't know one another's strengths and weaknesses and don't know how to pitch something to someone else, right? I know how to kick the ball to you, Anthony, because I know this side of your body is stronger than that. I know what you're probably going to do with it. I know where to stand, et cetera, et cetera. So, anyway, back to building this. What we found is that once you get to know most people, you find something to connect with them around. You like them. And I can tell you, I remember working with one team that had a frankly, I thought they were a bunch of jerks when I walked in the room with them, and when we started to peel the onion of what was going on here, we realized right away because they were not nice to one another, we started to realize that they didn't know one another at all, and they were judging. So, we peeled that onion, we did a couple little exercises, and for sure, they didn't wanna do them at first, but then they got into them, and that started a whole avalanche, it started some momentum going, where they started opening up more and sharing more, and then when it's in teams, you don't only want sharing, you want sharing your best ideas, and then you want people to build on those ideas, right? And question them, disagree with them. And that requires that there's a human element to that. That's why you wanna build belonging. And anyway, let me stop there and
No, no,
talk
I think it keeps going because okay, so there's like the ongoing joke of corporate America is that you have to have a fun fact, and we have a fun fact at the beginning of every strategy session. We don't just say it's just for the sake of it. It's tell us something that you did when you were younger. What was your favorite youth pastime? And the purpose of that is to support the knowing, the understanding. And I think that what I hear from you, and if you were trying to reframe me, which you did, is you don't necessarily need to like them, but you're likely going to connect with them better, even if you don't like them, if you at least have an understanding, appreciation, recognizance of who they are as a human being, you can kind of get over yourself in order to like get the task at hand. So I think it's fascinating. But please go on, tell me more about what I don't know and what we might not know.
okay, so let me tell you that better than asking about, what poster you had in your childhood as a on the wall of your bedroom, it's better to ask, "What are you excited about right now, and what are you nervous about with regard to the work that we're doing
Mhm.
together?"
Cool.
Or in your life in general. I mean, something that gets out positive and negative. You don't want it always to be positive, and you don't necessarily want it to be it can start surface level. What do you some teams wanna talk personal, some teams don't, it's kinda like a more masculine or more feminine, teams do different things, doesn't really matter. What matters is that I find out, Anthony, what your talents are, what your interests are. What the way you think. And ultimately, I mean, the first cluster of norms we have in our model is about how we help one another succeed. So I need to know you, what you're aiming at, what your needs are in your part of the team, in your role outside, because we can help one another. That's what collaborative empowered teams do. And you can help me, but goes around comes around, that's what happens in empowered teams.
Sweet. I mean, we could talk for hours about this topic. I think it
Yeah.
is one of those things that is a lifelong learning for leaders, for, well, emotionally intelligent leaders. I have a final question. take it whatever way you want, as I know that you will. You strike me as the kind of person that has no problem, saying what you think. What is your hot take on something that you might, as you read and see, and you're like, no, this is full of shit, either intentionally or not intentionally? What is your hot take on a perspective that might be common or pervasive in teams, groups, or anything else? You might just say flaming hot Cheetos are just no good, whatever,
Sure.
your perspective on it.
I love that question. That's brilliant. All right, my hot take on executive development programs is that they don't teach leaders how to build teams. It's all about me, me, me. It's all which leaders love. I mean, I've been working in exec development programs for 30 years. I know what they resonate with and what they don't. But I also know how to give them what they need, which is they need to know the actions that matter when you're trying to get team members to work together well. It's we don't teach that. So my hot take, and I make it my business to get the agendas, excuse me, I couldn't think of that word, of all of the executive development programs for leaders and team building programs for leaders in the best exec ed programs in the world. And I gotta tell you, they are not very good.
Okay. Good to know. We are launching our leading strategy, and we have three components. One of the components is dynamic teaming. So I would love to have you look at it and say, hey, I
Love
got
to.
this wrong. And I also
It's
think
not
that,
hard to fill the gaps. I can I'm happy to look at it.
well, you know what I was thinking? I'll include this episode as part of the required reading, because I think it's so critical. I think your book is required reading. Vanessa, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work? Where can they read some of the stuff that you've published in Harvard Business Review and other great places?
Sure. Well, my book is coming out with Harvard. Get it. You can go to my website, vanessadruskat.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, which I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I love to talk about teams. This is my vocation and my avocation. You can also find me on the website for the University of New Hampshire. And I should mention that Harvard, my book started with a Harvard Business Review article that I wrote with my colleague Steve Wolf. It's now been republished for the 6th time because it's been so popular with their readers, okay?
Awesome.
And so it is something that resonates. It's a topic that resonates and that a lot of people are getting a lot from. Thank you, Anthony.
The
Appreciate
pleasure's
being here.
Pleasure's been all mine. Thank you for sharing. I think it's like you said, a skill, an aptitude, an awareness that many leaders lack. It takes time. I believe the juice is worth the squeeze. And, take away from us is, don't ask bullshit softball questions about, what your first CD was, but really say, hey, what are you loving about the work? What are you excited about? And what are you maybe terrified of? What are you not liking? And just, cut the crap for teams and just start
Yes.
getting the work done. So,
Yes, it's really
thank you
good.
so much for being here. It was a pleasure. All the best with the book, all the best with the future publications. I know it's going to be extremely successful.
Thanks.
Folks, my guest today, Vanessa Druskat. Check her out online. Get the book for your teams. Have it be required reading if you're ever around UNH. Be sure to look her up. This has been a Strategy and Leadership Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you share it with your teams to elevate your ability to make a difference in the world around us. And as always, see you next time.